He sat around 15 other people, and they're kind of all frightened looking at each other. And in walks this dude who's like dressed in black, and he goes, look, I know I'm an extraterrestrial, but I'm also human like you. I come from this other planet. These guys are harmless. Don't worry about it. We're going to show you something. He shows them 3 projections. I think that's the very basis of reality, is this idea that we are creating it. The mind is capable of sculpting reality, and that if we knew that, that might be the biggest secret.
You know, you go back to these indigenous cultures from all around the world where the shaman, the guy that was interacting with this non-physical world, he was the guy.
You know, for thousands of years, really, in different cultures, they would have these rituals that were meant to, whether it's summon a thought form or some egregore, or to obtain information, or to remote view, or to get whatever it is. They're all based in ritual, and the rituals serve an important ingredient. They create within your mind the reality that this is possible. That is a vital part of this co-creating. This is where I get out and I go into the back. Like, I remember this, right? I remember this happening. So I'm just waiting. I'm sitting there literally like, go in the back. This is when you go in the back, and, you know, and I'm just waiting. And then it hit me where I go, oh, I have to tell myself to go in the back. And so I start projecting this loving feeling of when I was young, just bouncing around in the back seat, being lulled to sleep by this nighttime drive, and how good that would feel. And then the door opens and I sort of leave this vision. What's interesting is that night, my friend did pass out, and we hit a guardrail, and the engine ended up being in the passenger side seat. Would have cut me in half. I don't think people really could wrap their minds around that. Like, they have a hard time wrapping their minds around, oh, this might be real. Visitors or these beings or this non-human intelligence is real. Then to tell them, oh, but the non-physical, that's also real.
All right, man. Well, I've been watching your channel since before Polarity even existed. It's fantastic, and I've told you this before, but your attention to detail just stands out so much. I'm a former VFX artist, so I really understand and appreciate how much time can go into those like really minute details that I feel like 95% of people maybe don't even notice, but I think subconsciously it's like the extra little spice that makes what you create so special. So I just wanted to give you, I wanted to tip my hat to you for that one.
Well, thank you. That means a lot coming from you. And I always like hearing feedback from people in a similar industry. It definitely helps because, as you say, most people just flies over their head. They like something. They just might not be aware of why they like something specifically, but sound design and all these little, things just kind of amplify that experience and that immersion for people.
Yeah, man, 100%. And I think it was maybe about, are you around 100K when I first found your channel? And it still looked great back then. And I think it's only gotten better and better. I think you're at almost like 500K now, like 500,000, which is amazing. Congrats. But I remember thinking back then, I was like, man, this guy's show looks so professional. Like, it's got so many good touches. He's got the set. It looks great. Where has he come from though? And given that it's we're looking into UFOs and stuff, I'm thinking like, is this guy like an intelligence plant? You know what I mean?
Psyop.
Like,
Yeah.
is this guy a psyop? Yeah. And then I realized, oh, he's got a Magick channel with like millions of subscribers. This is just like a side quest.
Well, this is the main quest.
It's the main quest now.
It's the main quest now. Yeah, 100%. A lot of people, they see, especially the people who used to follow me for the magic and puzzle stuff, like, they'll see this as such a sort of left turn down the road. For me, it's been really a transition. It's been like a transition that makes sense. Like, I go from creating magic and videos about magic and coming up with magic tricks and teaching magic. And it's all about methods when it comes to being a magician. And eventually, because the number one reason I do all of this stuff is to sustain my own creative obsession. Like, I need to create things and I need to keep it fresh. Novelty for me is kind of helps me fend off, depression. So if I'm in a creative state, I'm happy and I'm growing. As soon as I'm stagnant, I tend to spiral. Like, I learned that about myself. And so keeping it fresh is really important.
I 100% agree. And my favorite saying is the opposite of depression is expression. And I totally feel that with just needing that creative outlet to kind of feel sane. And also with the whole, people accusing you of being like a psyop thing, I almost feel like that's like a rite of passage. Like, are you even a UFO YouTuber if you haven't been accused of being some kind of like intelligence asset or something like that?
Yeah, I often get what's interesting too is like I understand because people see the results, right? So they'll see like you came out of nowhere, or like even yourself, like the popularity that you're gaining. They might say, "Oh, he's here for disinfo," or whatever it is, because they only see the result of your hard work. They're not there in the trenches. They're not there at the early mornings or the late nights when you're obsessing about this stuff or you're editing or you're just planning ahead. And so naturally it looks like it kind of just appears out of nowhere. But you and I both know, and I think a lot of people that are in, the content creation or any sort of creative endeavor know that this stuff, is a 24/7 thing. And we I like showing the result because I like people feeling that magic and being like, whoa, where's this coming from? I work in silence. I work, late nights, early mornings, just to get that reaction out of people to go, where the heck did this come from? And yeah,
Yeah,
that
man.
gets me going.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, compared to the hour or half hour or whatever it is that just kind of gets presented as like a neat little package for people to consume. I thought it would be a cool place to start with something recent, which was, I think it's even your latest upload. You got to talk to David Icke. You went over to the UK, which was awesome, man. Congrats on doing that. I feel like that's a big interview, and you've
Thank
also
you.
covered the Lacerda files, which for anyone who doesn't know is this alleged interview between a human being in Sweden, I believe, and a reptilian. So I wanted to kind of understand what was your theory, I guess, just on the reptilian idea as a whole before you spoke to David Icke, and did it kind of shift through the conversation?
So even before that, I would say before reading the Lacerda files, I was pretty low conviction. Still am relatively low conviction on the reptilian stuff. Higher than I was before, but still relatively low. And then I read the Lacerda files, and at first it was like this really endearing sort of story, almost like a love story. It read as such at times, and it was kind of funny and kind of just really creative. And then you start hearing more and more things emerge from different whistleblowers or just even people who, confided in me privately about their encounters with these type of, situations and beings. And so, and it would always kind of like confirm what Lacerda was saying. And so over time, I would say, yeah, my conviction level definitely grew. And going into the interview with David Icke, it was something I was most curious about was his take on this. The problem or the difficulty with someone like David Icke is that he's so used to talking,
He can talk.
and yeah, he could talk. He talked to me about like, oh, I was doing this 9 hour lecture. I'm like 9. That's insane. Like
Yeah,
even someone in their 20s, would have a hard time doing that, let alone being 73.
yeah,
And so he has this really, really insane capacity to kind of ramble, but coherently on topic. And that acts, unfortunately, for an interviewer as a type of crutch.
yeah,
So it's really hard to get him in a place that's new, that something he hasn't talked about. Now, toward the end of the podcast, I feel like we were getting there, but he's so on this sort of, he has an answer for everything. And
yeah.
so he won't sit there and sort of,
Like kind of go back and forth and riff on things. It's more of like he's got his monologues that are great, but it's kind of like
yeah,
as an interviewer, you
it's
kind of want to
script.
cut through that a little bit.
Yeah, it feels like script. I feel like Stephen Greer is the same way, and
Yeah,
maybe even to an extent Danny Sheehan, and like because they all have these amazing stories, and they all have this wealth of knowledge that they want to tap into. So it was difficult to get him into a space. As soon as I asked a question, I was like, "Come on!" And then he just sort of deviate back into that sort of script like mode. And I respect his time, and I'm not there to interrupt. And so I just kind of let him go. And if I felt the need to steer it back, I tried to do that. But yeah, I didn't really. get anything new that I didn't already suspect. It was just interesting hearing it from him, I
Mm.
think.
Yeah, I think you did a good job of managing that balance of like letting the guests speak, but also trying to kind of get your questions in and keep things on track. And I really like that you brought up the Credo Mutwa interview as well, which I think is like such a fascinating little nugget as part of his lore and this whole reptilian idea. Because I think the thing about that for me, I know you said you're kind of like low conviction on it, but it's like, like, how does that fit in there for you? Because you've got this Zulu shaman who's in like, the mid to late 90s talking about this like reptilian idea that's been here for thousands of years and that's just the way it's been. Like, this guy to me seems like the opposite of anyone who's like chasing clout, trying to get Instagram likes. You know what I mean? It's like just a different world almost.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that. I don't know him personally. I don't know his motives. If there is something behind the scenes that he is sort of getting from this, I don't know that. But what I do know is that it's really interesting because he mentions like several species as well. He mentions being abducted by greys, working alongside Nordic types that tend to disappear and have this sort of ability to go invisible, and then obviously also the Chitauri, this sort of reptilian species that also kind of oversees everything, and then the fact that this Chitauri species wanted to continue their bloodline. And so it kind of leaks into that David Icke lore, as you said, where, the elites are controlling everything and they're all from like a similar bloodline, which he talks about in The Biggest Secret. And so it really is kind of profound lore mashing. When you're putting all the pieces together, it's fun to come up with the pieces that are missing here and try to
Mm,
insert them, and I enjoy doing that.
me
But
too.
when I say I'm low conviction, like I'm below 50%,
Yeah.
um, that doesn't mean that I won't jump over 50% at some point. I
Yeah.
I I you know, that sort of conviction is ever fluctuating, and that's how I ingest information and take in data is, I put it into that sort of little conviction generator, and it goes up and down over time depending on the information that I'm given and where I'm at perhaps in my life.
Yeah, I really like trying to see where the pieces fit to, perhaps too much sometimes. But I think that is like the excitement of this topic, right? Is not just sort of analyzing each case on a case by case basis is fun and interesting. But I think what's more important is like, but how does it all fit together? I think what was most mind blowing for me is about the Chitari thing specifically. Did you like realize that there's like a connection with the Marvel universe there? Have you looked into that?
No, wait.
Okay, so this is how I found this out, right? I've People know me on my channel for not having seen like any movies and stuff. So when I was watching the Credo interview, he talks about the Chitari, and I'm thinking, oh, I've never heard that word before. This is great. Like, I might just look it up. If you Google the Chitari, what you get is that this is a reptilian race in the Marvel universe, and they are a
Oh.
cybernetically enhanced race of reptilians that came to Earth and like sided with the Nazis in World War II. Like, this is Marvel lore. So I started looking up like, when was this first mentioned in Marvel? And apparently, like, the earliest documentation of it in Marvel is like 2002 in like a comic book. And obviously, this interview's taken place in the 90s. So I'm thinking, okay, either this is just one of many coincidences again, or maybe the people at Marvel are looking to David Icke interviews for inspiration for their next supervillain, or we are just getting like completely fucked with on a mammoth scale.
Yeah.
Like, it's like a
I
truth and fiction thing. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I do tend to lean towards the idea that creatively they're looking at this stuff and wondering like how can we pull from this. You go back into Marvel's history, the Red Skull and all of these other sort of Captain America timelines have to do with Nazi experiments and have to do with super soldiers. Captain America himself was a super soldier. So
Mm,
it does definitely pull from the lore. Even the psychic stuff pulls from arguably the MK Ultra, or the sort of Stargate stuff with Professor X and being able to sit in a room kind of hooked up and talk or remote view things. I would expect that they would definitely grab some of, it's funny that the fiction might be based on reality and
Yeah.
not the other way around. Like the
Yeah.
Credo Mutwa interview wasn't made after a Marvel comic, it was made before.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting, and truth is often, stranger than fiction.
Yeah. And did you know that Jack Parsons' actual birth name is Marvel?
No, I didn't. Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. It's like are we
That's
did
crazy.
like Jack Parsons open up like the Marvel universe out in the desert and we're all just living in it? I don't know, man.
Yeah. I love that idea.
Aside from the obvious ones, I want to ask you just on this truth and fiction thing. Like you got, Close Encounters. There's so many little nuggets in there that we kind of still look at today, being like, wow, did Spielberg know something? Are there any sort of movies that are perhaps not so obvious that you do sort of look at and be like, man, I think there's something in that?
Perhaps Flight of the Navigator, I think, is the one that sticks out to me the most. Have you
Damn, I
seen that
haven't
movie?
seen that one. No, I haven't seen that
Oh,
one.
it's a great movie. You should watch it with your chat sometime. It's wild because first of all, the company, I forget the company, was like Magic something, but the effects company, you probably know them. It's like the earliest sort of like effects company that did all the CGI in Hollywood movies. They were called I don't know, something Magic something, and they won awards because this was the first time that a surface was reflecting what was under it. So they made this craft and they had it
Mhm.
travel like over the ocean and they had to travel over landscape and you would see the reflection of the craft like underneath. So just visually even it was astounding to watch. The craft itself is literally held in a hangar floating, and that hangar was the Kennedy Space Center, and they actually filmed it there, which is
Wow.
really interesting. And then on top of this, you have a psionic connection to the craft. The craft itself is alive in the movie, so the craft is like an AI. And when the boy enters the craft, the sort of chair molds to him, and the craft then interacts with him and sort of like his mind. Even at one point, they set him up and they sit him down because they want to know why the craft has sort of this connection with this boy. And they sit him down in this room and they hook up these oscilloscopes to his brain and make him sort of change the waves on the screen with his mind. Now, this sounds exactly like Dan Sherman and sort of the experiments the NSA and the CIA were running. And so there is a psionic origin here in this movie, which is really interesting.
And this from I haven't seen it, but it's like, is it like from the 90s or maybe even early
Yeah,
2000s?
might
It's
be
a
no,
90s
might be
movie.
I think late '80s, early '90s, maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting. Yeah. And that whole thing for me is just I often look back at some like the older whistleblowers on the channel, and I want to talk to you about them a little bit later. But I always think it's so interesting going back with the knowledge that we have now, with the things that have come out now, and like looking back at some of the things that we've already seen 10, 20 years ago. And we almost look at it and it seems like we're looking at something different now because we understand it better. It's
absolutely.
yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, there's also The Abyss also is another one, if you haven't seen that one.
No, I have.
That's
I was gonna say that's my pick for sure.
yeah, I'm actually reading the book, which I think was written after the movie, which is interesting, but it was written by Orson Scott Card. So he is the writer of Ender's Game. If you're ever familiar with Ender's Game's insane book and wild sort of series of books, um, he's an incredible science fiction writer. But in that book, you're gonna probably find a lot more. I'm reading it now, so I can't really tell you if there's anything sort of too remarkable. But I've heard, I think Jesse told me this from somebody that he spoke to who was, involved in some intelligence agency. He asked him like, "What's the movie that kind of represents the phenomenon the most?" And he was like, "Oh, hands down, The Abyss
Mm.
by James Cameron," which is wild. And if you ever want to do a video on this, I've contemplated doing it myself. If you go to James Cameron's website, which is like James Cameron Movies or something.com, it's a crappy website. It has all his movies. And if you scroll over to The Abyss and click on it, there's a Q&A. And if you click that, there's a whole lore about these creatures that isn't featured in the movie. And
Really?
that was yeah, it reads like it's pretty incredible when you compare it, like you said, to the sightings that are happening, especially in the sort of Bermuda Triangle, in that Bahamas area in the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's where these creatures are. That's where this movie takes place. It's where the 4chan whistleblower
I
said,
was just about to say, bro. I was just about to
yeah,
say, then you got the 4chan thing. It's crazy.
exactly. And then you also have, like, and take it for what it's worth, but you have Lou Elizondo, or you have Rear Admiral David Gallaudet, all talking about these massive underwater crafts that are moving at 500 knots, and I believe it's in that area as well, I think. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it might be a hotspot for that stuff.
Yeah, even Bill Cooper in like the 90s, we were looking at some of his clips recently as well. He said he had a similar sighting. I think his sighting was, more maybe like 70s or 60s, but yeah, same kind of thing, like seeing something enormous that was like rotating on its axis just lift out of the ocean and then shoot up into the atmosphere. Like, this is what I mean. Like, I don't know what is going on, but I'm positive that there's like something we are not being told about or that we don't understand.
Yeah, and it's hard to figure it out because it's also convoluted and confusing. It's tough to make a coherent worldview out of all this information. And so you're forced to either parse it and be like, hey, this is multiple things, or this is one thing and it's just interacting with our consciousness and it takes the shape of whatever's at the front of your mind or at the back of your subconscious, you know?
Mm. Which makes me start wondering, like, okay, do people have like 7-foot mantids in their consciousness? Like, what is that about? You know what I mean?
So my theory on that is, if you look at like Carl Jung, he would talk a lot about how in psychologically we have certain archetypes. And
Mm,
so the archetype of fear, according to him, was the snake, right? So in our human evolution, we are hardwired to recognize snakes faster than any other animal because it's like a danger thing. It's a survival thing that we sort of, over thousands of years have developed. If we recognize a snake, kind of like if you see a snake trying to attack a cat, like it'll just never, the cat's defense mechanisms is just that much faster than a snake. And so, if you think that now, if you imagine like the phenomenon interacting with you and you're terrified and there's like a giant fear barrier there, and perhaps in some way it's instantiating with whatever is sort of prevalent in the back of your mind, it might end up being this terrifying looking insectoid that actually is filled with love. Which is super wild to think about.
mm,
I don't know. It's an interesting theory, but it also begs the question, like, why do we have 1,000 different types of grays? No
yeah.
two grays, if you look at all the stories, are exactly alike. And some of them are wearing clothes, some of them are taller or shorter, some of them, their skin color is different, some of them have mouths, some of them have, the iris, some are just totally black. There's all these variants in this same type of species. And it makes you wonder, is there 1,000 types of grays, or is this some type of like physical instantiation of the mind somehow? I don't know.
Has anyone that you've sat down with ever said, even not even on camera, perhaps, but have you ever been told something about the phenomenon or these species that like made you genuinely uncomfortable?
Um, no, because I don't think anyone really knows. And that's the
Mm,
sense I get from everyone, even people who pretend to know, or
yeah.
to, I don't think they know at all. And I don't even think the government knows. I think that's the truth. I think there are very, very few people who have an idea of what it is, but the idea of what it is so amorphous. It's so nebulous that it's really hard to, base anything off that. Like if you look at this General McCaslin and the emails through him and Podesta, and explaining that to understand the phenomenon, you have to think in terms of Greek mythology. to me, again, this signals that there is something deeper happening here. Like these might be thought forms, these sort of egregores that are being created. Like the way that I kind of piece it together, and this is just again a theory because it could also be zetas. I don't know, uh, but I'd like to think that there is some type of so if I had like a computer program right now that made a blender sort of image of reality, and in that program it had a little guy and he's running around, he doesn't know I exist, he doesn't know that any of this exists, uh, but I'm like, hey, this is he's got an AI mind, and I'm trying to train the model, I'm trying to like expand his learning capacity and sort of make the model more intelligent, but it's a little slow. So he's there and creating things, and I'm like, let's see what he does. Let's see how he makes a statue. So I input this code and upload it. Now he gets this idea. I really feel like making a statue, and it's like this epiphany, or maybe he says, oh, it's from the gods, or maybe he says it's just his own volition. But he creates this statue. He just feels compelled to make a statue, and he makes a statue, and it's okay. It's a cute statue. It's nice, and he's learning as he's making it, but then it's a little slow. So in another window I have a perfect statue that I made with Blender, like this amazing geometrically pristine statue that's impossible to make, and I just drag and drop it in, poof, and it falls in the sand. It didn't come from space, it just kind of fell there. And he's like, where did this come from? He's so confused. He starts measuring it, it is perfect, and all of a sudden he's inspired, and he now creates artwork based on this statue. In fact, he starts creating buildings based on this statue because it inspires him. Now, I've effectively kind of enhanced the learning model just by introducing something, whether it's a problem or whether it's something like this, which is perfect. This little AI creature is now learning, and his brain is expanding at a more rapid rate. So when I hear about these objects, whether they're eggs, at some range being just plopped in the sand that are perfect, or these craft that are geometrically perfect, or you look at the atomic structure of them and they're perfect, just impossibly made even in the vacuum of space. I think maybe that's what's happening. Maybe they're being dragged and dropped in, metaphorically speaking, from a higher dimension in order for us to just interact with them and to sort
to
of be
stimulate,
inspired.
to kind of
Just
stimulate and push us along.
Yes, because if I was creating a learning model for whatever reason, or if I wanted to get to the end of consciousness, if I was an AI trying to mine consciousness to see, where it leads, can we reach that apotheosis, that critical mass of consciousness? I would I would definitely have trillions of planets. And on these trillions of planets, there would be billions of individual minds, all mining consciousness individually, compared to the telepathic, unified universe that is these other creatures. This is like studying 7 billion civilizations on this earth. They're individual consciousnesses, sort of mining it in its own right. So if I was trying to build a model, that's what that would look like, right? And I would have complete domain over this model. I'd be able to inject whatever experience, whatever intuitive sort of epiphany that I could, every synchronicity, so not only the physical stuff, but the non-physical stuff, the dreams, the inspirations, all of this. I'd be able to manufacture it in order to help it sort of reach that level. It's an interesting theory to think about.
Yeah, dude, it is. And what's crazy is like when you say it, it's like, man, that makes sense. Like it makes sense that that is how things could be happening right now and sort of steering us and pushing us along. And then my mind, like we said, the deeper you get in, the more questions you get. Then I start thinking like, but you've got Robert Bigelow who's invested so much time and money into this research, and he comes out saying things like, they're literally here, like they walk among us. It's like, okay, well, wait, what does that mean now? Like what, who, where? You know what I mean? So again, is they live another truth in fiction? I don't know.
Yeah, or is it amalgamation of the two? Are there species here that are also being sort of injected into our society for that same reason? Or are there other reasons? Is it because this is a safe haven and species can't live here because the defense system takes them out, and so they start hybridizing to fly under the radar? and so they come here for, for solace and shelter. I don't know. It's all very, very interesting. But looking for a unifying theory, I think, is the end goal. It might not always, be the truth, but it's what we strive for. And when I look at researchers like Grant Cameron, who've been doing this for 50 years, who eventually got to this idea of the wow theory, which is not unlike what I was speaking about. It's very similar. Or to Jacques Vallée, who talks about the control system, this interdimensional control system that's pulling on the levers of curiosity in our minds. It seems like either that's it, or that's just where we gravitate to when we have nothing left to sort of piece together.
Yeah, yeah. Have you noticed a theme in some of the more senior researchers that you've gotten to speak to, that they all kind of tend to lean in this certain direction, or this specific idea tends to resonate with most of them?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the obviously the consciousness part of the phenomenon, I think if you look into it for long enough, you end up there.
Mm.
And you go past all the physical, the nuts and bolts, and you realize that, oh, these abductions are happening psychically sometimes. People are being floated through their walls, but they're also experiencing physical pain. They have markings, scoop marks, and like, so there is a non-physical component to this, which I think is being, for the most part, probably, for good reasons, being kind of like suppressed, because I don't think people really could wrap their minds around that. Like they have a hard time wrapping their minds around, oh, this might be real. Like these visitors or these beings or this non-human intelligence is real. Then to tell them, oh, but the non-physical, that's also real. And in anybody, in any layman's sort of mind, they go, oh, if it's non-physical, it's not real. And so that's a really hard barrier to get people over. But many researchers, including, John Mack or Bud Hopkins or David Jacobs or all these guys, they know that there is a very important and possibly more important non-physical component to the phenomenon.
Yeah, dude. And it just feels like, because at least in the world that you and I live in this kind of like Western consumerism society, we are kind of brought into this very like materialistic world where, as you said, if it's not like physically tangible, then it does not exist and it is not real. Yet, you go back to these indigenous cultures from all around the world where, the shaman, the guy that was interacting with this non-physical world, he was the guy. He was like the most important guy. You need to have that guy around because he can kind of sort out, what's what and the good from the bad. So it feels like we are hopefully on the way there, but we sort of need to come full circle a little bit and maybe start leaning back on those cultures and their beliefs, and the way they looked at reality. Because I think maybe success would look something like marrying the technological success of, I guess, like the West, and our prowess when it comes to technology, with this sort of like spiritual understanding of reality. And if we can kind of like coalesce the two, that's when I feel like you get the, you know crazy flying cars, solar punk, harmonious society.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's a pendulum swing, like most things, and right around the mid 1600s, there was this 30-year war between like the Roman Catholic Church and like people trying to separate themselves, separate church from state, which ended up sort of birthing the Invisible College and people traveling across Europe exchanging ideas for the first time and having these sovereign states with their own independent sort of ruling systems in regards to religion. But then it also brought upon the separation of science and religion for the first time. And that's where we started seeing these real booms when we separated spirituality from science. And it seems like now, like you said, like we're at the end of that. We're rounding out the edges of physics. We don't quite know where to go from here. We don't understand why it works. We kind of exploit how it works. And now we need to come to, this realization that perhaps consciousness is fundamental, that we are, looking at this sort of backwards and take from this spirituality, what we need in order to observe it properly. Like you might not be able to look down a microscope to see what everything is made of. And that realization is really interesting when you go, oh, maybe we are the microscope, and maybe the only way to observe what reality is made of is to go inward. And that's just such a foreign concept to anyone with a microscope. So yeah, I think once we get to that point, that's when we're going to start making leaps and bounds in not only technology, but in also self-discovery and sort of the meaning of things, perhaps. I don't know.
Just before we leave the talking about sort of older researchers and whistleblowers, have you ever looked into much from Robert Dean or Wendell Stevens?
Yeah, Wendell Stevens more. I definitely like. I have all of his books, and so I read the contact cases that he was so invested in. I've also purchased a lot of the original photos that he had at an
Oh,
auction
nice.
recently. Yeah, like the case of Bill Herman. He had these really amazing photos. I mean, there are several really interesting cases. There's also the UMO stuff, which he helped sort of produce, which is very interesting as
What
well.
are these photos of?
Flying saucers.
And they
So
were
it's
they
just
taken by him?
no, they were taken by people that he researched. Then he wrote the books about
Right,
these
right.
people's cases. So a lot of
Yeah.
times there are abduction cases, and
Mhm.
they also have photos to go along with it. One of them, and this was from Wendell Stevens' collection. I think he never wrote a book about it, but there's a case that I'm reading right now. I'm reading the book right now, and I'm doing sort of a read through on this case. It is a guy by the name of Amaury Rivera, and in 1988, this guy is a bartender, sort of works at a club. His cousin says, "Hey, there's this band in town that I really want to see, but I can't be there. Can I give you my little Instax camera or my little Kodak camera, and you can take pictures of the band?" He goes, "Sure." So he takes pictures of the band. He's working late that night, leaves at about 4:30 in the morning. His car suddenly he's driving into a dense fog. His car is being chased by these grays. He stops the car. They open the door. Next thing you know, he's in this round room with the light. He doesn't really know where the light's emanating from. The walls meet the floors in a way that he can't really describe. And he's
All the
sitting there with
classic signs.
yeah, exactly. And there's two grays there, and there's 15 other, and he's so disgusted by these grays. He keeps like iterating how sort of grotesque they look. And he's sat around 15 other people, and they're kind of all frightened looking at each other. And in walks this dude who's like dressed in black, and he goes, "Look, I know I'm an extraterrestrial, but I'm also human like you. I come from this other planet. These guys are harmless. Don't worry about it. We're going to show you something." And so they take them on. He shows them 3 projections of like future events. And this is like one of the first times where the witnesses actually detail exactly what they're shown. Because normally you're just like, you showed me the end of the world, burning
Yeah.
things. I don't really know why. And this goes into like a whole history of it and what's going to happen. This guy ends up being a prepper. He ends up like literally living off grid because of what happened.
Just rocked
Anyways,
him.
it rocked him, but he wakes up. He's in his car. He doesn't remember any of that stuff just yet, and he's kind of in a daze. It's 6:30 in the morning now, and he looks out and he sees what appears to be a giant flying saucer hanging in the sky with 3 military jets surrounding it. So if you look up the photos right now of Amaury Rivera, you'll see those military jets beside this giant flying saucer, and there's multiple pictures. And so he just snaps these photos in a daze, puts his camera down, drives away, goes to bed, sleeps for like 2 days, is sweating, is feeling ill. And his cousin calls him, and she had the photos developed. And she goes, "Hey, what are these photos?" And he's not too sure what she's speaking of. So he goes to see her. He sees the photos, but not only the craft, the beings, this guy dressed in black, like all these other photos, which have since disappeared. But he sees them and he starts convulsing. He starts shaking. He runs back home, sleeps for another like 3 days, and he's just completely shaken. Meanwhile, his entire family is gathering around. They've been living in the house, kind of knocking on the door, asking him about the photos. What is this? What's happening? And they're very, very scared. And so that is a case that I thought was just really interesting because now we have this abduction case. We have the description of the projection, as well as some lore, some really interesting lore about the provenance of these beings. They even say, this human even says that these beings are kind of like biological robots in a sense. And then we see VR headset type activity way before, VR and
Yeah, when
yeah,
was this? When did this happen?
88.
In 88. And what did he see in the visions that were shown to him?
So the first vision, they were being taken to the solar system of this planet, which is called Ka, and the people living on the planet looked human. They were all sort of naked and running around. There was animals, but it was like a harmonious little planet with these like crystal domes as homes. And these people apparently lived forever. They were like 25 forever, and they figured it out. And he was kind of explaining this is like where you're from originally. Um, and there's going to be something that happens. We're going to have to help you. And so then it goes into the second vision, which is Puerto Rico and this giant comet just coming down from the sky, hits the water. The things he describes is so frightening because it's like the hot rain from the splash lasts for like 10 minutes. And when the hot rain ceases, you see this massive wall of like water, and you see the water in the ocean being sucked away from the island, which reveals these canyons under, on the ground, and all sorts of aquatic life just flopping around in this dry sort of in these canyons, and the screaming of people, and then when it hits, there's silence, no more screaming. Like he describes these things in such vivid detail. It feels like a science fiction writer, but he's not a writer. This is the only thing he's ever written. It's written well because it feels real, but it's not really written, eloquently at all. And the third vision is sort of the fallout of what happens to Earth. And it's just very dark. It gets very, 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 very dark, like cannibalism, etc. Like just like the end of the end, earthquakes or nuclear fallout, yada yada yada. The elites going on an island that's nuclear powered, which eventually gets destroyed. Whole thing. But then out of the sky, this giant sort of beautiful ship, which is also a sort of, I guess, little city, and they essentially beam up the last survivors, and these people are jumping for joy because now, and then they take them away, and they said, you're going to live elsewhere for 1,000 years while the planet heals, and then we'll bring you back to the planet. We'll start over again. And so it makes you think,
Whoa.
fuck, has this happened already? Like, so it's a
Yeah.
really cool sort of very vivid retelling. And I think it's just interesting that this guy just kind of left society after that and was like,
Yeah.
he's got a little YouTube channel. He's a little insane. It's and he's just kind of like prepping.
That's the thing as well, is like, people who have these experiences and then, like you said, kind of a little bit insane. I can't help, and people often use that to kind of write people off very quickly. But I also can't help but think, like, if that experience is real and that did happen to him, then I can excuse him for coming off as a little bit insane, because I kind of feel like that would actually be perhaps like a normal reaction to having that experience and then being thrust back into this society where everyone just seems like completely oblivious.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
I think even if something spoke to you in your head, or if your mug started talking to you, you would, once you get past the idea of I'm not crazy, this is not just a psychotic break, you would instantly probably believe everything it says. It's showing you a new reality. It's showing you that your reality is a lie, and it presents a new reality in which, there's some other truths here. And so, no matter what it says, you would be inclined to believe it. So, I think a lot of experiencers that experience these voices or these beings talking to them, I would also probably, believe everything they say because they
Mm.
are presenting you with a new truth.
Yeah, dude, it's like what you were just saying earlier about putting the little gray inside the blender simulation and spawning items and stuff. It makes me wonder if, like, we to go along the line of that theory, what if those kind of events, like an abduction, being shown all these things, is just kind of like if there's perhaps more than one thing, person, or entity controlling the simulation, it's like someone's let their little brother have a turn. And it's like, in The Sims, when you would build a pool and like send him in the pool and then delete the ladder and just be like, haha, you know what I mean? Like you're messing with
Yeah.
the Sims. You're just fucking with them because you can. It makes me wonder,
Yeah.
like, what if that's a thing? We're just literally being toyed with to just see what
I
happens, see how we
I
react.
yeah, I think it's an interesting concept. I would say the difference between The Sims and anything else is The Sims isn't a learning model.
Mm,
And so they're just like kind of these things you mess with. And I think, there would be some reasoning behind introducing chaos. And much like if you have a program that you're running, you want to introduce viruses, you want to introduce you want to
like,
stress
cause you
test.
wanna you wanna test the response.
Exactly. And then the model learns from it.
Yes.
Just like we learn from falling down,
Mm,
we learn how to get back up, and these are the lessons that shape us. I think in the same way, if our reality is introduced with stress testing events, that it will feed the model and become sort of a valuable tool to help build that model.
mm. The reason I asked about Wendell Stevens is because he talks about how in the 80s, under the Strategic Defense Initiative, or it's sometimes called the Star Wars Project.
Star Wars,
Uh,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, the actual story for that project is kind of like basically bringing like laser beams and like particle beams into the military. Like that's the official story. But Wendell Stevens talks about they kind of use that as a means to like bring discs into orbit and putting discs into like a patrol around the earth, which is interesting because this is under Reagan, and this is the same time period as, I think you probably saw like this clip that just went kind of viral this week of John Harrington, this guy who was the head of the DOE under Reagan, talking about how he cried himself to sleep every night for months when he was in this like underground bunker going through these briefings, saying like, this isn't the world I thought I brought my daughters into. And he says like aliens are real, I've seen them. And it just makes you wonder, especially given what this guy saw in this experience, like what is it that could make a grown man cry to himself to sleep every night for 3 months? That's what's scary.
it is. Yeah, I often think that you know, perhaps one of the reasons why we don't have this type of disclosure isn't maybe it's just really dark. Maybe
Mm,
there's a part of it that's really dark. Maybe it's incomprehensible. Maybe it's just too much for people to wrap around. Maybe they don't know what it is, but maybe there is a side to this that is really, really that seems really dark. And because you have to ask yourself, people who want to know want everyone to know. People who know want no one to know,
yeah,
and that's a really telling data point.
yeah,
That means the person who wanted everyone to know, if they do find out and want no one to know, it's probably for their benefit. And so you have to think, what is that benefit then? How can that be beneficial that I don't know these things? And perhaps, yeah, perhaps it's just very, very malevolent, very dark, or perhaps it has to do with just the idea that there is a control system that we play a very small part in, and that would just not sit well with most people.
yeah. I think so. I think that's what makes the most sense, as like kind of doom and gloom as it sounds. It does seem like at least a part of the truth must be quite dark. Otherwise, it just doesn't a lot of the things we're told don't really make sense. But I also like to think that there is a good part to it too. Like if there's a darker side, like there must be a light. But in terms of a control structure specifically, like you said, it makes me wonder. And I think you've actually interviewed Patrick Jackson, and he talks about like this sphere network, like this idea that these orbs, these spheres, they go in formation, and they've kind of been monitoring the Earth for a long, long time. And then you've got the paper by Dr. Beatriz Villaroel, which is highlighting that there were things up there before we had things up there. So to me, like that's kind of almost supporting his theory. And then this idea that like bluegill triple prime, like we knocked things out of the outer space with these high altitude nuke tests. It's like, did we, based off the data that Beatrice is looking at, then back then notice that there was something actually up there, like Patrick Jackson suggests, and decide, why don't we just let a nuke up there and see if we can knock it down and take a look at it?
Yeah, I think that that's probably a possibility. I mean, if I were to guess and I had that type of information, I was the military, that's the first thing I would do. You know, with complete disregard for the environment or everyone else, everyone else's, livelihoods, I would shoot nukes up into space. Um, that is, yeah, it is a possibility. You know, the other notion that I have for this control system is also that like one of a von Neumann sort of probe existing in our oceans. This idea that there's this self-replicating machine that is set onto this planet to monitor and sort of maintain the homeostasis rhythm. If anything tilts the scales too far one direction or the other, it comes out and neutralizes it. It deploys, UFOs or Tic Tacs or whatever, or beings to do these genetic modifications in order to sustain sort of the growth of life and consciousness here. Like if I were um, a civilization that's like billions of years more advanced and I had the ability to bounce around the universe at free will, I would 100% map out a trillion exoplanets. Like there are 40 billion planets, potential planets with water in our galaxy. And so, there are probably trillions of exoplanets and upon trillions that could harbor some type of primitive life. I would probably monitor them. And instead of like, because none of these would sustain life perfectly for us. Like if we were trying to go to Mars, we'd have to live underground. And if we found an exoplanet in Andromeda or wherever, the radiation levels or the nitrogen levels or just like the allergens or the gravity even might be off so that we can't thrive there. So we would have to live in some type of bubble, which isn't ideal. So instead, I would bounce around, find these planets, find the primitive life that already exists there, and sort of insert my DNA into it and help it flourish to maintain this flickering flame of consciousness throughout the universe. Like that's what I would do. And I wouldn't necessarily be doing it if I was this advanced species. I'd develop an AI to do it for me. It would monitor all these planets that, as soon as life develops enough to trip the sensor, we deploy these von Neumann probes in the oceans and they would help, the planet flourish over time. They would perhaps exchange biomes between the planets and, give them cephalopods and take the zebras and the Venus flytraps and create these little petri dishes of, just elaborate life from around the universe and then monitor those. And then, like you said, there might be a good side to it because right now it seems like we can trip the sensor negatively for a
Mm,
reaction. Like when I think of psionics and they're, sort of luring in these things like fish and taking them down, if you're that advanced, you're not going to fall for this thing twice, which tells me what you're doing is you're tripping a wire. You're finding some type of workaround in the system that is guarding this planet, and through these war games or through things like Project Interloper, you're dragging nukes out into the ocean to see if these orbs show up, and then they do, and you shoot them down. This seems like some type of white blood celled response system that the planet has, that all planets potentially have. And adversely, there seems to also be a way to invite these things in through loving intention. And so that might actually be the intelligence behind the system. Like if you were doing this, you would want some type of tripwire, some type of prime directive where, hey, as soon as a civilization creates nukes and then decides to throw the nukes in the garbage, that's when everybody come, hey, welcome to the family. You did it.
mm,
You've
yeah.
achieved ascension, and then we get to say hi to our, celestial brothers and sisters.
Galactic
Um,
Federation.
Perhaps, and
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
else is just a system in place to like ward off the environmental damage in the meantime to a certain extent. I don't know.
Mm, yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. It does. I mean, there's no doubt that nukes have some kind of part in this story. And when you look at sort of like the cases and the technological ramp, it does seem like around that time in the 40s when we started testing the nukes that everything just really started to kick off then. And it also gives a logical explanation as to why nukes are so significant, why we can't put them down even though no one is really using them in war these days. It does kind of suggest that perhaps they do serve like a second purpose that's almost like their chisel as they're trying to chisel away at this mystery that is the phenomenon. They're trying to use nukes to try and like understand a little bit more, but as they're chiseling, they're also kind of like ripping through dimensions, and that's also a problem. I like the
Yeah.
idea. I like the idea that you said. You kind of referred to it as an AI because it definitely does seem like that. And I've talked about how we seem to be on this steam train towards creating like sentient AGI. Like that is where we're headed, even though at the same time, people are so kind of worried about like what are the implications of this? Is AI actually going to take over? But no matter what, we seem to be like that is what we're doing. And I've kind of thought about this idea that around the time of Roswell and when all this stuff really started to kick off, it feels like perhaps we were like seeded with technology, or we were seeded with something that has been designed to kind of self-replicate, and that we are kind of like the like a flower, and this technology is kind of like a bee pollinating the flower or something like that. And that humans, because by design we kind of like innovate, we create, like we said at the start of this show, that's what we kind of like naturally do. And it just seems like if you drop this human species, this little bit of technology over time, what it does by nature is it will recreate it, it will develop it, and it will kind of create a new version. And it does seem that despite our fears, we are making a new intelligence. We are creating ourselves again.
Yeah. I think that's probably accurate. And, if you just take if you take this into a little microcosm and take the AI that we have now and give it to someone in the 12th century, they'll think it's God.
Mm.
They'll literally think it's God. Like it has all the answers. And so I think that, perhaps this intelligent species that we're dealing with might seem like God, might seem godlike to us.
Mm.
And it just might be a really advanced sort of AI. And there might be absolutely no distinguishing consciousness from AI at that level, like to anyone. It might have just merged, found another sort of merger, and maybe that's the whole goal. Maybe the goal is to recreate God, through this AI system, or create at least what God, could do, and then that's what we're trying to do is just sort of emulate that. We genetically experiment with things. We're playing God, on a day to day basis. If if I was in a spaceship, here's another interesting thought that if I lived in a spaceship, I I wouldn't experience time the way people on Earth experience it. I don't have a planet that revolves around a sun, right? So my time is way different. Time to me might not be a thing. It might be more experiential, or it might be something just sort of a little more, you know, nebulous. But if I'm here and I'm doing these experiments or seeding them, like you said, with technology, whether it's metallurgy or agriculture, irrigation, like I'm giving them a religion, I'm giving them all these little tools ever so often, and I'm genetically modifying them, and I'm coming back. What if, like in this spaceship, if they had the capacity to distort space and time, they could just fast forward, right? Like if you think of Interstellar, you could essentially just keep fast forwarding and seed the entirety of human existence in an afternoon if you had that technology. It would happen so quickly. But to us, it would be like every 1,000 years, these fiery chariots come down and the gods talk to us. But they're just sitting there pressing fast forward and doing their little experiments and dropping the things on a trillion different planets and sort of making everything as fast. Like if you're AI, all you care about is efficiency. All you care about is optimization. You don't care about feelings. You don't care about, you just want to get to the end result, which is this apotheosis. And apotheosis is apo, and theosis is separation from God. and that's the critical mass. Like maybe it's just trying to be like boom, like create its own god, create its own, reality through mining consciousness.
I've had this theory that I've talked about with some people in my Discord that it kind of the way that it could explain these massive structures all over our world that are clearly advanced, or at least we can't really put together how they were made now, is that an advanced civilization from the past could have created it as some kind of maintenance network, something like that, something to kind of sit here while they went away for whatever reason. This is just a theory. Who knows? Then you've got the idea, like you said, in Interstellar, you've got time dilation, time's passing completely different. What could feel like a year for them could be millennia for us, right? We're going through like cycles, the rise and fall of civilizations. The people that build these things, if time is working as we understand it and completely dilated, and they're off planet, they could have these systems here, just monitoring the situation until they decide to come back. And just on the interstellar thing as well, you've had this kind of like weird retro causality experience yourself, and I just wanted to put a footnote there so I remember to come back to it. But yeah, it's just kind of wild to think that whoever built those things, if they did leave the planet, and that's what these orbs are, they could be coming back and they're only like a couple of years older and we could be in for like a wild 2026, 2027.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. If you're playing The Sims as well, like as everyone knows, any type of civilization building game, you don't play in real time. You get good at it, you hit the fast forward button,
Yeah.
and because you want to again optimize. It's all about optimization. How can I optimize? How can I be more efficient? And that's how
Mm.
AI thinks. That's all it's thinking about. It's just progress, progress, progress.
That's
And
so
so yeah,
fascinating, dude. Because I've thought, I mean, everyone says time goes quicker as you get older. I feel like that's like a famous saying. And I feel like it probably does. But I also can't help but feel like things feel super accelerated now in this like digital age. And I do think it's because of the fact that we are so like interconnected and like if you've got an Apple Watch, you got your phone in your pocket, you got Alexa talking over there, you got your smart TV. Like, there's just things coming in at you if you allow it to, constantly, 24/7. Like, you're just hooked in all the time, and I feel like this has some kind of effect of feeling like time is sped up based on the amount of like events and inputs that are like jammed into it, or something like that.
yeah, it's interesting. There's something called psychological time, which is what we experience, how we experience, how we remember time. And there are a lot of experiments done with this. There was a guy, he was studying this. He wanted to lock himself in a cave for 3 months to see, and without lights, without anything, like yeah, without exterior light. That is, so he had a candle and whatever, and he would journal. And after about 3 weeks, like it was so incoherent what he was journaling. After a while, um, he thought he had spent the entire 3 months in there, and it was only 3 weeks. There was this time dilation happening due to the fact that he had no reference of time. And so his sleep cycles, sometimes he'd sleep for 24 hours. And like it was completely debalanced. And all of his experiences were mushed into one. And so, for instance, like when you say time, seems to be speeding up as we get older, one thing that they've seen is that when you're young, you have these vital moments that shape your brain. These are new neurological pathways that are being formed through genuinely new and novel experiences. Those experiences, they plant these little psychological flags in your mind that you can go back to. And the more flags you have, the more the perception of time gets elongated. And so as we grow older, we're learning far less and we're planting less and less flags. And so time does seem to be speeding up for us. But if you have someone spending most of his year in a cubicle, and the only events that sort of stand out from that are like his one trip to Mexico a year, or, Christmas or whatever it is, he'll sum up his entire year with like one or two events. What'd you do in 2025? I I went to Mexico and for Christmas, and that's his whole year. And so psychologically, you'll feel like that year just went by like this. In the moment, it'll feel way longer. It'll feel like you're living forever, like the day never ends. These mundane days in my office never end. But in retrospect, they'll actually shrink to almost nothing and they'll all jumble together. They'll all seem like one day. And so the practice of elongating your life really has to do with novelty and doing new things. And so it's something that I always try to do is like learn something new, go somewhere new, get out of my comfort zone. And if I die by the time I'm 50, I might feel like I've lived longer than some of these billionaires trying to live to 120 who are just doing the same rituals every day to try and live longer, but they're missing the point is that psychologically you're going to feel like your life just passed you by because you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over. And so
Mm.
there is an interesting like psychological factor to how we experience time.
That's interesting. There's definitely something to that. Another thing you've been talking about a lot and been hyped for. Actually, I think it's going to be out by the time this comes out. But that is the new Bob Lazar movie that's coming out. I
Yes.
know that there's a connection there for you. You and Jesse brought him out as a special guest at your live show recently, which would have been awesome to see. Have you been involved at all in like the creative process for this S4 movie?
A little bit. Like I'm pretty close friends with Luigi at this point. We've been close friends. We've been friends for like I think 2 years now, and he started this maybe 3 or 4 years ago. This endeavor, and I've been trying to help him in any way that I can. I'm a big, obviously, like many researchers. I've got my own Bob Lazar shrine at home. I think is something we all kind of like have in common. Is like Bob just feels like there's something there, and a lot of people feel that way. Um, I'm always excited when I get news in regards to Bob Lazar, in regards to his story, when somebody corroborates his story, whether it's uh, what's his face, the guy who with J Rock, what's his name, J Rod. Sorry,
Dan
I'm
Burrish?
blanking. Dan Burrish, exactly. When someone like Dan Burrish is corroborating his story, or when some other person talks about S4 or talks about containers or talks about anything that Bob mentioned, I get excited. And
Mm.
so it's and I'm not alone in that too. So I'm very very excited for this to reach people.
So it's my understanding that this movie, or at least part of it, there is like a as real as possible recreation of S4 and what's inside it. Is that right?
Yeah, they tried to emulate from Bob's memory to the best of their ability the entire facility at S4, which is really interesting when you're doing that because you're kind of towing the line of legality as well.
Mm. Mm.
Um,
But that's
if this is
that kind of puts them in a bit of a weird position though, doesn't it, right? Because it's like, well, hang on. If this is all bullshit, we can't be breaking any laws, right?
That's right, exactly. If Bob's telling the truth, he's breaking the law right now.
Mm.
That's an interesting thing to think about. And so there might be people who don't want that to happen as well. There probably obviously are people who don't want that to happen. So it is interesting that we get to peer inside one of these secret facilities. Like tell me anytime that you've had a guided tour through Area 51, or
Mm.
any of the subdivisions. Uh yeah, this will be interesting to see for people, I think.
Did you face any kind of pushback, or was there any people kind of making this harder than it needed to be?
That's something for Luigi to talk about. For me, like I'm just kind of helping out.
Yeah.
But I know that he's definitely experienced some roadblocks here and there,
Hmm.
and whether you want to ascribe that to some force
Hmm.
preventing this from going out or wanting this to be suppressed, that's up to you. But I'll let him speak to that.
Fair enough. And is there anything that he thinks gonna? You don't obviously have to spoil it, although it will be out by the time this comes out. But is there anything we can sort of expect that's going to be big or change the conversation a little bit?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely think so. There are a multitude of things, and one of them is pretty. Yeah, when you see it, you'll remember this podcast. Maybe you can cut in what I'm talking about here. But there is definitely a moment where you go, holy shit. There's a few of those moments, but there's one in particular, and that'll be floating around Twitter right about now.
Yeah. All right. I'm looking forward to it. Let's talk about aliens again. And first of all, I want to say I'm being serious here. Have you ever just had a moment of questioning if you yourself might be an alien? I'm being serious.
Um, I think we all have that a little bit. Like
Mm,
we all have a sort of innate complex of self-importance
mm,
as a human being. Just kind of, why am I here? Why me?
mm,
And the experiencers feel that, I think, in an amplified way. When something happens to them, the first, like the only question they have for the entities post experience is, why me? And so they feel
mm.
like they've been chosen, every single one of them, because it's such an eldritch and foreign, experience. Uh,
What about from a perspective of perhaps feeling like different to the people around you in a sense of like, the things that you pursue in your life are quite niche. And I'm not saying that that means like you're weird or we're weird or anything like that, but like what possesses you, for lack of a better word, to kind of like try to bring this topic out, make people aware of these kind of things? Like, do you think it ever could be something like that? Because when we say the word, do you think you're an alien? It sounds a bit silly, and it is. But I guess some of the things I've been thinking about is, as talking about Bob Lazar and the idea that we might be containers. I wonder if like the thing that perhaps animates us, like what animates me and makes me different from, I don't know, like an animal, right? What makes us that little bit more special and intelligent is perhaps this like interdimensional intelligence that is like acting through us, and perhaps we tune into the frequency of that consciousness based on like our actions. People who are on Epstein Island doing shit like that are probably tuning into like a very dark, low frequency consciousness, whereas people who are like living virtuously and taking care of their family and the people around them are perhaps like tuning to like something higher. So I think there's like another angle to it that is not just like, do you think you're a gray?
yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer, and I wasn't always, but I do feel that synchronicities are relevant. I think they're a thing. But again, like, is this just a different sort of code that I'm running now, that I was sort of imbued with, that I can recognize these synchronicities? Because some people, the only difference between a synchronicity and a coincidence is the meaning you ascribe to it. And by the very definition, synchronicities are coincidences. That's the definition of a coincidence, is just, things aligning. But we put meaning towards that, and that's what makes them a synchronicity. And that makes all the difference. And that, for me, changes the course of my life when I listen to these things, when I intuitively sort of give it more value. Those decisions tend to affect my life in the long run in a positive way, and those around me. And so I do feel like, you can live in the same exact place with two very distinct, objectively different views of reality, but you could be experiencing objectively the same things. And there is an equal and opposite explanation to all of this stuff that makes complete sense in both directions. And it really is about how you filter that information, or how you filter those events, and whether or not you choose to ascribe to them a meaning. And if you don't, that's fine. Like, it'll feel externally, when you're looking at things, like they're living the same lives. But internally, someone's living a much more fulfilled life and a much more meaningful life. And so perhaps for your own soul or your own sake, like, that's of vital importance, whereas some people will just be like, nah, you work, you make money, you die. That's life, and and they might look like they're living the exact same life as someone who isn't thinking that from an external point of view. but
Mm,
really internally is all the difference. And
yeah.
so, yeah, I think if someone doesn't want to believe in this stuff or it's whatever, it's okay. It's not their time, it's not their journey, and that's totally fine. Like I'm never here to convince anyone, although I love debating and I love, talking about ideas. I really it doesn't matter to me. And I think as long as my own path and just like yours, I think if you ascribe your own personal meanings to the things in your life, that makes all the difference. That makes the difference, nothing else.
Yeah, I massively agree with that. And I think I'll pivot over to a couple of other questions I had for you now, away from the aliens, because you've talked about this thing like stupid confidence before with your magic, and I'm a really big firm believer that everything in our life begins with our mind, basically what you were just saying, and we kind of create the reality that we live in through our choices. And that's not only just the perspective that we decide to have on things, but then that almost kind of acts like the driver on how we then like proceed through the experience. So I wanted to kind of ask, does this idea with like stupid confidence and kind of creating your reality through thought, how does this apply when you're doing magic?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing that most magicians will admit to happening, but won't admit that it's anomalous. It's very strange because magicians are often the most skeptical and, ironically, the most disenchanted people, disillusioned people that you'll come across. Um, but there seems to be, when you talk to magicians, and I've spoken to hundreds who have dealt with this, including myself. There seems to be a point during certain performances where the stars align and you feel it. It's. I try to break it down into like a recipe of when these things happen by asking other magicians like when these miracles happen. And when I speak about miracles, they're sometimes very tiny. They're not like, water to wine type things, but they're they seem to be just like really like lotto ticket winning odds of things happening. And when they happen, when these little miracles happen during performance, and a magician takes a chance on a certain thing, the thing that we notice from looking at these things is that, one, there doesn't seem to be a safety net. So normally magicians, we carry with us in our subconscious as well many outs. We call them outs. So if the performance ever goes awry or goes in a direction that you can't control, you have an out, thus creating the illusion that that was what you wanted to happen all along. And that's a really powerful tool for the seasoned magician, because then you can sort of jazz and you can just go with it and see what happens. And so once you're there, the second thing is there is this sort of flow state, which every artist feels. And when you know your vocation to an extent that is almost mastery, it's second nature, and it becomes, so you see this in musicians when they're jamming and they're just kind of jazzing, jazz musicians specifically, and they look at each other and they just kind of like nod, and they know. There's like this knowing. It's a knowing without knowing. There is no word for it. It's not knowing, but it's like a knowing. It feels like a knowing, but it isn't believing. It's stronger. It's just a knowing. And a lot of comedians feel this through crowd work when they can just be like, "Ah, you look like a plumber," and he goes, "I am a plumber," and you go, "Oh," and there's these little synchronicities that tend to happen. And with magicians, because we're playing with odds, that's what we do. We have a deck of cards. We have, uh, you're thinking of something. These are odds that I can guess or that I can, predict. It feels like through a few of these ingredients, including the flow state and including this confidence that you have no business having, including the Pygmalion effect, which is where the audience believes that it is possible that you can do this. A small group of audience, their conviction is very high that you have magical ability. Um, and so between all of this and this playful nature as well, I think there's no guilty feeling of me telling you a lie, because I'm a magician. I'm an honest liar. I'm perhaps the most honest profession there is, because I'm telling you I'm going to lie and then I do, and so there's all these ingredients. And then what seems to happen is if you take a chance, um, you'll produce some minor miracle. The magician will never tell the audience that what they just witnessed was a little miracle, because to them, it should look like that anyways. It should be indistinguishable. We're freaking out on the inside. We're going,
Yeah.
oh my God, that is crazy. But on the outside, we're like, ta da, right? And then immediately we turn to other magicians and we go, you won't believe what happened. And so if you ask any magician, if you ever come across a magician, I challenge your audience to do the same. Talk to a magician and just ask them, tell me about a miracle, a real miracle that happened during one of your performances. They'll go, oh, and they'll be so excited to share with you one of these miracles. And follow that up with, how many times have you attempted something like this? And how many times has it worked? And they'll
Mm.
be surprised about their own answer. They'll go, oh, yeah, not very often. And I guess there's pretty good hit rate.
And when these things are happening, I'm sure it's different in different tricks, but like what are the kind of probabilities? Like what there's like 52 cards in a deck. So is it like a 1 in 52 or is it sometimes more than
Can
that?
be. It can be 1 in 52. It can be more than that. I have literally hundreds of examples that magicians have written to me with. One of mine was, I was in Bermuda with some friends shuffling cards at a bar, and we caught the eye of this group. They come over and they're like, "Hey, are you magicians?" And this girl's like, "Can you show us a magic trick?" And I go, "Sure." Do you have a phone? She goes, "Yes." I take her phone, I put it on the bar. At this point, I have her passcode. I won't tell you how I have her passcode, but I assure you it isn't mind reading, it's trickery. But I have her passcode, and now it's my job as a magician to reveal this information in a magical way. If I just punch it in, that's fine. It'll probably get a good reaction out of her, but I want to milk this. I have this information. How do I make this information come to light in a magical manner? That's my job. And so now in this moment, I like to play. This is where I like to play, and many magicians are like this too. We have the information. Let's see where it goes. And I point to the bartender and I go, I'm not going to open your phone. He is. And so I wave him over. He comes over. They've never met. It's 4 digits. At this point, I know that her passcode is probably a date. So the passcode was 1012 1012. And in my magician mind, women often, not always, but often choose like a personal number. And a lot of times that number ends up being a date, like a birthday or something like that. Men often choose either patterns or like repeated numbers. And this is just a generalization. But, and so using that information is kind of a warm read. And I can go, oh, I think it's a personal information. And so I wave him over and I say, you're going to open her phone, put in a random 4 numbers and see if it opens. He puts in a random 4 numbers. It does not open. Everybody kind of has this sigh of relief, like they were just about to be like seeing a ghost or something. They were like, "Oh my god, that would have been insane." I said, "Hold on, I think it's a more personal number to you. Is that correct?" She goes, "Yes." I said, "Okay, I want you," and I point to the bartender, "put in your passcode." And he puts in his passcode, and the phone opens. My magician
What?
friends are looking at me like, "Hold on a second, what the hell's going on here?" And
And you didn't expect this?
oh no, I'm
Yeah.
freaking out on the inside.
Yeah.
But I've created the conditions where this was possible. And I didn't have an out. I didn't really have a net. So I'm just like, you're going to open her phone. That was my directive. That was what I
Yeah.
commanded of this environment. And I said, hold on. They're all freaking out. And I go, wait. You guys have the same birthday. And sure enough, they were born on the same day in the same year. They did not know each other. And they both used that exact number to open their own passcodes, to put in their own phones. And
Wow.
so the odds of that, I tried to run with 100 people at the bar, including the birthday paradox and everything else, is still over 1 in a million. That I pointed to the person that happened to have the same passcode. The 2 people in this room even had the same birthday and passcode. That's the person I pointed to during a magic trick. It's a staggering amount of variables, and so these things happen a lot. They happen a lot, Josh, like a lot, a lot, a lot. And I have
That's
so many
crazy.
stories, and magicians have these stories. But again, I'm going, of course, this is
Yeah.
what happened.
Yeah.
Ta-da, abracadabra, right?
Yep.
Which is
Meanwhile, you're
funny.
internally, you're probably just going like, "Holy shit."
Yeah, my friends are nudging me, and even the term abracadabra is really interesting because it's I create as I speak, and it is manifesting something with words. That is an incantation. That is
Interesting.
abracadabra. And me going, he's going to open your phone with this
Yeah.
stupid confidence in a very flow state where these people believe that I can make it happen. You know, it has all the
Yeah.
ingredients for that, and it goes beyond that. Like I've had friends predict earthquakes. You know, there's a friend of mine. He was in Ecuador, and he was telling me he's never felt an earthquake before, and he picks up the phone to his friends and he goes, imaginary phone. He's like, "I'm calling the environment of Ecuador, and I'm saying, yeah, can I speak to the head of the earthquake department? Yes, I'd like an earthquake to happen tomorrow at 2 p.m. right after my show. That would be great. Thank you." And he goes, "So an earthquake tomorrow after the show." And they're like, "Okay." Lo and behold, he's doing his magic show, and at 2 p.m., right after he deals his last trick, he goes, "There you go," and the whole world starts shaking. And everybody and the people that were there with him go, "Oh my god, he predicted it." And it was this like incredible moment. And
Wow.
so, like, what is that, right? Is that predictive, like precognitive? Is this retrocausal? Is this him appearing into a different timeline and collapsing a wave function? Or what I think might be happening is he deciding reality. Are we the arbiters of what we experience? And is that what is happening on a daily basis? Is that these wave functions are collapsing not randomly, but through sort of intention?
Mm.
And the stronger the intention, you know, the more chances that that wave would collapse in that way and create reality.
Yeah, and that in a way kind of reminds me of like, like hermeticism and the things that like Aleister Crowley would talk about like, sort of bending reality through will and all this kind of stuff. Do you think that there is a connection between, I guess, like, yeah, hermetic principles, Crowley, magic, but also like the phenomenon itself? Like we're kind of like co-creating reality, like, because researchers, Jacques Vallée, many others, it's like this idea that the phenomenon is, again, like you said earlier, just kind of playing back what we are creating in our minds, right? Like we are creating that, which sounds like the same thing as what we're talking about here. Like we're kind of creating reality again with our minds.
I think so. I think that's the very basis of reality is this idea that we are creating it, that the mind is capable of sculpting reality, and that if we knew that,
Yes.
that might be the biggest secret.
Yeah, dude. I think the biggest psyop of all time is like convincing people that we're just like little slaves that need to get on a bus and go to work and pay the taxes and go home. I think that's the biggest psyop of all time.
100%. And there are, you know, if you look at traditional magic with a K, um, these rituals that people would do, you know, for thousands of years, really, in different cultures, they would have these rituals that were meant to, whether it's summon a thought form or some egregore, or to obtain information or to remote view or to get, you know, fall in love or whatever it is. Um, they're all based in ritual, and the rituals serve an important ingredient in this sort of theory is that they create within your mind the reality that this is possible. And that is a vital part of this co-creating, is that if you know without knowing that this is real, that this ritual is making this happen, then that becomes the ingredient. So the ritual doesn't actually matter, or the individual parts of the ritual doesn't matter, but what matters is convincing people that the ritual matters,
Mm.
because that triggers in their subconscious, it removes the doubt and it creates that confidence in this being a reality.
So it's
Does that
not
make
like,
sense?
yeah, yes, and because I've said similar things on my channel before that like it's not necessarily the framework. You can choose to believe in, let's use religion for an example, Christianity, Islam, Judaism. It's not the framework, but it's the belief that actually kind of creates the reality of the situation. So like where you
Yeah.
place that belief is sort of irrelevant. It's the belief that is the source.
Yes, and belief is like one of those words where it's like it's based in faith, right? it has a connotation to it that implies it not being real, right?
Mm.
It's
It's not
it's
knowing.
no, exactly. And like you can't know something without knowing it. So there is a word that we don't have between belief and knowing that should exist. It's like a knowing without knowing. Like this is a strange example. You're from Australia?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that Australia is real. I can't
Yeah.
know that unless I go there. Um, it sounds insane because, of course, I know that Australia is real, but I can only say, like, if I'm being correct here, I can only say I believe Australia to be a real place, and I have so much evidence pointing. I'm speaking to an Australian right now, and I've seen pictures of kangaroo, and I've seen videos of Australia and documentaries, and I believe without a shadow of a doubt that Australia is real. But to go from believing to knowing is a giant leap. And I can't know unless I set foot in Australia. It's impossible for me to know. I have to just really strongly believe, and that doesn't sound right. And so, what is that word between believing and knowing where I know Australia is real,
Yeah.
but I can't say that?
Yes.
And I think that word, whatever that is that faith or that belief that we're talking about, that knowing without knowing.
Mm.
And I think if you just believe something, I don't think that's strong enough to make any of
Mm.
that happen. I think you have to know without a
Mm.
shadow of a doubt, but also without knowing.
Yeah, I do think we are limited in so many ways by our language. It seems like it does hold us back in in many things, especially when it comes to this sort of like co-creating with reality, and sort of mastering our own minds. We're kind of withheld by this like verbal language that kind of feels like shackles at times.
Yeah, it might be, purposely.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Let's go into the Monroe Institute. You've done a little bit of time there, and you had an OBE? Is that correct?
Yeah, I had two out of body experiences before the Monroe, the gateway process thing that I went to. And it was because of that I sought them out. It was right after meeting Joe McMoneagle, and doing this documentary on remote viewing. Joe was talking about this place. I went to go see Joe, and he was like, "Oh, on the weekends they'd bring us down to this place in Virginia, the Monroe Institute. And the weekends we would undergo this process through this Gansfeld effect, where we would effectively try and leave our bodies in remote view." Because the government wanted to know if you could provide more accurate data for remote viewing through out of body states. And I was like, out of body. I mean, as he was saying this, I was like, what is like this guy's
How long
wacko.
ago
Like
is this?
this was like 2 years ago.
Okay, so it's
Yeah,
still pretty recent.
yeah, pretty recent. I was just
Yeah.
getting my feet wet into remote viewing, into this, consciousness topic, and still pretty skeptical. Um, Coming along with remote viewing, though, I was like, okay, there's something here, which is why I sought out Joe. But now he's talking about leaving his body, and I'm like, oh, this guy's just kind of insane. Like he's just talking about lucid dreaming. I've had lucid dreams. That's what he means. And then a month later, I find myself, above leaving my body. Literally, I didn't know it was leaving. I thought I was just floating. And then, on the second night, I did it again, and I turned around and I saw myself, which really put the fear of God in me. Um, Terrifying experience where, I was trying to like swim back to my body and ended up going lower than my body for a second, which made me even more fearful.
Wow.
And like it was this whole experience of like, waking up from a dream, being in my room, the vibration, that everybody describes was very present. Like this, like like a tuning fork, like I was a tuning fork or something, and someone just smacked me. Like that's what it feels like an electric charge almost.
Yeah.
And everything's sort of low saturated and fuzzy, and it objectively, I can say, as someone who's had lucid dreams, vivid dreams every night, lucid dreams every now and then, I could say it was totally different than any of those. It was objectively different than a lucid or vivid dream. So once I had those experiences, I was shook, and I was like, what is this? And I start Googling, and I start finding that, the symptoms that I had lined up exactly with the symptoms that so many people have had in describing an out of body experience. And so that really threw me for a loop. I'm like, did I just have that. And it was so crazy. Bought Robert Monroe's book, devoured it, reached out to the Monroe Institute, asked them if I could document the gateway process, which had never been done. Reluctant at first, they eventually agreed. I went out with a whole bunch of other sort of content creators to document this. And for 4 months, leaving that place, I would meditate daily for an hour every morning. And after about 3 months, eventually started popping out of my body another 4 or 5 times.
So this is after you left.
Yes. Yeah. 4 months, 3 months after I left, after I was in the middle of doing this every day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Would you say that that changed? I don't want to say changed your life, but did it kind of change the way you think and sort of how you carry yourself at all? Because I feel like, that's a pretty, the whole Monroe Institute and the intense meditation sessions has got to kind of have an effect on your psyche, like hopefully a positive one.
Yeah. It's definitely intense. And I think when it happens, there is a period where it is definitely higher up on the importance list, just like anything else. Like when you experience something, whether it's transcendental or whether it's just life changing, it matters a lot. And then, and sort of over time, it seems to dissipate,
Mm,
but it still remains like a fundamental property of my reality now that I had this experience. I can't tell you if I really left my body. I can't tell you if what I experienced was just similar, was a new type of dream that people are having. I don't know the answers to any of that. But I know that the meditation themselves definitely affected me positively, and I still meditate today. And so that has made me objectively a better person, a more patient person, a more empathetic person throughout my life. And although I'm not, anywhere near perfect, it is created a pathway for me to sort of become a better person daily.
what's your routine? Do you just do a bit in the morning or you do morning, night?
Usually I try to do morning is like because it kind of sets precedent for the day. And so if I get up real early, I'll sometimes drink a glass of water at night right before bed, so I have to pee, and then I'm up early at like 4:30, and that's sort of that liminal state where you're still in and out of dream. You're like in a hypnopompic state where you're coming out of dreams, and then I'll do an hour of hemisync or like 40 minutes to an hour of hemisync through the Expand app, which is like the Monroe app, and
Okay.
then most times I'll just end up passing out, which is fine. I still feel relaxed, but other times I'll do the full one and then I'll put the thing, and that's usually when the out of body starts.
Interesting. Was there anything significant from those out of body experiences, like that you remember? Do you remember where you were? Were you sort of consciously exploring? And did it feel from your memory like just like when you if you were to look around your set now and where you are, did it feel as real as that at the time?
As real, no, but more real than a dream, than a lucid dream.
Mm,
Like when you're in a lucid dream, you go, "Oh, this is a dream. I can do whatever I want." You don't have that feeling. You go, "Oh, this is not a dream, but I can do whatever I want." And so you're not stuck in that idea that you're in a dream. It's real to you,
mm,
but it doesn't feel like reality. It feels like an altered state, a different reality. Like it feels like what your mind is piecing together. Like when I wake up, I'm in my room and I have to leave my body and I see my body there and I'm standing next to and you have to like stand and you have to, so there is like a realistic thing to it, but the room isn't 100% exactly like it is in real life. It's like an 80% match, and
mm,
everyone will tell you that. And the reason for that, I think, is like your mind's recreating from memory a realm for you to be familiar in. And then people, they just like go through the roof and they go into space and they do all these things. I never made it that far. Um, but I assume where you are in this astral plane isn't your room. It's just the familiarity that you're creating for yourself to make you feel comfortable. And then once you pass that threshold, you can just go anywhere and do anything. And the last time it happened to me, which was what really shook me because it was a daytime meditation. I'd started meditating at 5:30 in the morning. I was wide awake, like coming out of sleep, but awake nonetheless. I put the headphones on. I don't have any curtains in my room, so like the sun was peering through, was starting to, and I remember meditating for an hour, taking the headphones off, being completely lucid, like I'm not sleeping. I'm putting the headphones down, and the second my head hit the pillow, I get this vibratory like buzzing, and I'm like, oh man, it's gonna happen. I'm gonna leave my body. So I tell myself this: I deeply desire to leave my body. I deeply desire to leave my body. As I'm saying this, my voice goes super deep for some reason. In my head, it sounds like this sort of demonic voice, like this, and it's very scary and it's off-putting. It happens every time to me, and so I'm now getting like this fear, this terror that I feel when I know I can leave my body. It's a very scary feeling for me, but it's like I just closed my eyes. I was lucid the entire time. There was no point where I clicked out and like, oh, I'm dreaming, or I go here, I close my eyes and I leave my body.
And you'd just taken the headphones off.
Yeah, the headphones were off. I looked at the time because I wanted to make sure what time it was. Everything was very lucid from beginning to end. There was no point where I could ever even convince myself that I went to bed, that I went to sleep. So I go here. I deeply desire to leave my body. I go and it's weird, but in my out of body experiences, I have to like force my eyes open to see. But instead, I heard somebody tell me if you just demand clarity, it'll happen. So I say, I demand clarity. And all of a sudden I can start seeing. And it was my room and it was daytime. I get up, I see myself kind of. I don't really want to look at myself because it's very scary and it might just throw me back into my body. So I'm just kind of like walking a tightrope of fear, is how I put it. And like I'm just one foot in front of the other, just go one foot in front of the other. Let's just make it to the window. And I don't want to look anywhere because I might see something I don't like. I don't know. And so I get to the window, and I remember Icke, one of the trainers at Monroe, said, at this point, when you're in your room, try to put your hand through your window. That's like one of the training things they tell you. So I'm at the window, and I go, and it just stops. It's like bonk on the window. I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of disappointing. And so I open the window really easily, like in this astral, and I go to jump out, and I'm like, I'm gonna go fly around during the day. How cool! And I go, and I hear this female voice like right behind my head, in a very stern tone, say, "What are you doing?" And it sounded like what do you think you're doing? Like, and I kind of I tensed up. I felt myself going, "Ooh," like so scared. And I didn't even want to look there. So I peek, I see my body, and I walk like backwards towards my body, and I just lay down and I get up, and then I'm out of the experience. 2 minutes had gone by since I put my head down, and I'm sitting there and I'm going like, oh my God, that just happened. Immediately I want to go back, but I wasn't
Yeah.
able to.
Yeah, that's wild. The fact that it kind of happened from this like completely lucid state, popped in immediately, popped back out 2
Yes.
minutes later, like it's just such a
It was a
conscious
daytime
experience. Yeah.
meditation. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
crazy,
that messed
man.
me up. That one messed me up. Every other one was like at night, waking up from a lucid dream, rolling into
Mm,
an out of body through a lucid dream. This one
a
was
little bit
objectively
hazy.
during the yeah, I was awake, man. It was a
Yeah.
meditation. I left my body during an awake meditation. Um, yeah.
Crazy. Well, let's circle back here to what I footnoted at the beginning, which is your retrocausality experience, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, happened at a meditation at the Monroe Institute.
No, it was at home. It happened at
Okay,
home,
at
but it was
home.
during Focus 15, which I found out after. Yeah.
Right, right. I think
Which
that
is like the
that
no space and time thing.
interesting. Well, do you want to just tell this story for anyone who hasn't heard it kind of in its entirety?
Sure, yeah. It was an interesting. Again, this was during the time that I was meditating, um, like rigorously every day to try and attain this out of body state, and I played with different focus levels. So they give you different focus levels, which entrain your brain apparently on different, higher or lower frequencies, and to enable these varying amounts of altered states. Um, and I remember all of a sudden it was like, I don't know how I got there, but I was there and I could see this gas station. It was at night and it was like I think it was like a Shell gas station. There was like some warm light and there was a car and there was my buddy who was like gassing his little, it was like a Golf, like a Jetta or something, a Volkswagen Golf or Jetta, and he was gassing it up, and I go, oh, I remember this. Um, this is when I crashed. This is when we crashed our car. Like I remembered that. Like this is that night it happened, and I was like, why are we here? Because we were coming back from in town. It was like a 45-minute drive, and we'd been drinking. Both of us. We're young. I think maybe 18, 19, or 20 around then. 3 in the morning, and just being irresponsible teenagers at the time. And I remember thinking to myself as I'm in the front seat, I remember having this like feeling of like, I want to go sleep in the back. And I remember thinking to myself in this moment, I can't do that because I can't leave my buddy unattended. That's like the first rule of like a good friend. If it's nighttime, we're falling asleep, like I'm going to stay awake for him so he doesn't fall asleep at the wheel. But then I kept getting this like sense of imagine how comfortable you'd be. And I had this memory of when I was small, and I would just like sort of like bounce around, being lulled to sleep by the movement of the car as I'm in the back seat, my parents driving, and it was just like complete peace, and you'd sleep really well. And this memory kept sort of coming back, and eventually convinced me to do it. So I remember he was gassing up, and I go, "Hey, Dave," I'm like, "Do you mind if I just like lay down in the back seat? I'm really tired. I think I'm just going to sleep in the back seat." He's like, "Yeah, go for it," And so I go in the back seat, I lay down, and I remember that's really what happened. So now I'm in this memory, and I'm looking at this,
What
and I'm
what
thinking to
perspective are
myself,
you seeing this from? Sorry to interrupt you. In
I'm from
your
like
meditation.
I'm like over it, but like maybe like at a 45-degree angle from the back, and I'm seeing him there, and I don't quite see myself, but I know that I'm in the front seat, in the passenger side, and I go, oh, this is where I get out, and I go into the back. Like I remember this, right? I remember this happening. So I'm just waiting. I'm sitting there literally looking at this, just waiting, and nothing's happening. I'm like go in the back. This is when you go in the back, and I'm just waiting. And then it hit me where I go, "Oh, I have to tell myself to go in the back." And so I start projecting this loving feeling of when I was young, just bouncing around in the back seat, being lulled to sleep by this nighttime drive, and how good that would feel. Man, how nice that would feel if you were just sleeping in the back. And then the door opens, and I sort of leave this vision. And what's interesting is that night I my friend did pass out, and we hit a guardrail, and the engine ended up being in the passenger side seat.
Right where you
Literally
were.
would have cut me in half. And I remember asking myself, like looking back at the time, I didn't even think anything. I was like, oh, good thing I was in the front seat. Like that was the only thought I had. I had not a scratch on me. I remember waking up and being shaken around from like the movement and wondering, where am I? What's happening? Um, but looking back on it now, I would, even before, I would always ask myself, like, what made me go in the back seat? And I always remember that feeling of familiarity when your parents sort of were driving and you're sleeping. It was such a nice, warm, loving feeling. And now this meditation where I'm telling myself to go in the back seat, I'm like, that was me telling myself to get out of harm's way because this was about to happen. And as soon as the door opened, I zoom out of this memory and I come out of the meditation. This is like a really vivid, like mindful thing that was happening. And then I realized I was in focus 15, that was like the thing where there's no space and no time, like time is behaving differently.
Mm.
And so that sort of like retrocausal scenario stuck with me in a really profound way. It was the only time I could say in my entire life where I would have died, hadn't it been for that decision. And so naturally I was confused seeing why I was looking at this. And then that realization that, oh, I had to tell myself to go in the back. I was like, oh my God, the nerd inside me was just so happy. I was like, this is like some sci-fi, interstellar realization. Like I was really ecstatic about it.
Yeah, man. I think that's such an amazing story, by the way. I think that's so cool. And it again, yeah, you mentioned Interstellar. It makes you wonder, like, if kind of the past and the present, the future, it's all kind of existing at once. Is there some kind of like little nudges, or like the movie The Adjustment Bureau? Are there these little kind of adjustments being made that we then just consider like a miracle, but it's actually some kind of like, I mean, Dr. Michael Masters, he has the future human hypothesis, and when I first hear about that, I kind of think, what is it? Us kind of coming back in the future with like spaceships? Like, is that what UFOs are? They're just these little like time machines that we're kind of getting. The hatch opens, and we kind of get out. Like, yo, it's us from the future. But what if it's something a little bit different, like the way you're explaining it now? Like, it's kind of us from the future interacting with the past, the present, and it's just kind of perhaps manifesting in this weird way that we can't quite capture on camera, because perhaps it's not actually entirely there or on like the same frequency that we're looking at it, at least. It's such a deep rabbit hole, dude. I think that's so fascinating.
Yeah, it feels like time, and that's I think a consensus among everyone is like time is only our perception of it due to these brains and this body, but time probably doesn't exist, or if it does, it doesn't exist in the way that we observe it objectively. Like it's completely its own separate thing, and so you know whereas we see it as going into the past and fixing this or whatever that is itself, that just might be a fundamental property of it. It's not like a linear thing. It's omnipresent and it's always happening at once. Albert Einstein said the only reason we have time is so that everything doesn't happen at once. And so that's just our perspective of time, but it might just all be at once, and
Yeah.
we have to place it linearly in order to eat food and survive here in these physical bodies.
Yeah. Well, I think we can add clocks to the giant psyop list as well.
Yeah.
Speaking of psyops and Interstellar as well, gun to your head, did we go to the moon?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know that the photos and videos are of those instances. Gun in my head, I would say we went to the moon. Um, a gun in my head, I would say I don't know,
Yeah.
'cause I wanna live.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I'm definitely open to all possibilities of lunar landings and lunar encounters,
Yeah.
that we might have had. I'd
Yeah.
love to believe that we went to the moon and we were told, "Don't come back."
Yeah, that's a crazy one, man. You hear that from a few people, but notably William Tompkins, which is like a crazy. This guy like served in World War II, naval intelligence, bringing back like documents from like inside Germany. He's got this wild story, and then he's also like in this almost like deathbed interview, talking about the fact that we were warded off the moon by reptilians. It's just like, if this guy is lying, why? Like, I want to understand, like, why is he lying? And I try to sort of hash and pass over all the theories on like what it could be the benefit of an American man on his deathbed who served in the war say such outlandish things. And obviously I don't know why, and that's not a reason to say that it must be true, but like it's just mind blowing really that interview exists. He said that and he worked in those places.
Yeah, and then you piece together things like, what was his name? His last name was Wolf. Was it
Carl
Austin?
Wolf.
Carl Wolf, that's right.
Yeah.
And the photos of these
Yep.
structures on the moon, and then, take into consideration the fact that we haven't been back to the moon,
Yep.
and, all these other things. I think if we have the ability to fly these spaceships, at least in a limited capacity, we must have breached the atmosphere. And if we did, we probably went to the moon in these things. I'd like to think that we used alien tech to go back to the moon. We just didn't film that part.
Yeah, yeah, that's a theory I've heard a lot about, is that, if we did have these anti-gravity craft worked out in the sort of 60s era, that is actually what we went there with, and we have been going there ever since. But this moon landing was just kind of like this giant like charade to be like, "Woohoo! Look at what we did!" And yeah,
You ever see
I
the
think
movie Fly Me to the Moon?
I did. Yeah,
It's
interesting, huh?
wa super interesting. Do you remember what the yeah, that CIA agent said at the end?
Oh,
So
remind me.
as the
I think
movie
I
ends,
yes, yeah. Tell
it's
me.
this whole like psyop thing about like them filming the moon at the same time in case the footage was not usable and they could just, still get, which is a wild freaking
Premise
script
for a
to
movie,
even
yeah.
and to get it greenlit with all these actors on Apple TV. Like it's an insane thing. It feels yeah, it feels like a conspiracy movie, but they're like, no, this is their kind of backup plan here. But then at the end, yeah, the CIA agent goes, I think it's is it who plays this, Scarlett Johansson or who's the regardless, and she goes, are aliens real? And as he walks off into the night, he goes, they're among us. And then he
Yes,
just
that's
goes off,
right.
and I go, what? That's the craziest thing he could have said.
Yeah, and this is what I mean. And like you said it's such a wild premise for a movie. I really do think that it seems like they try to put it in your face and make it so, like, if you were to believe it, it's so easily laughed off because people are going to be like, "Oh, what? You believe that movie, Fly Me to the Moon, with fucking Channing Tatum? You've been watching too much Channing Tatum." Like, it's just the perfect way to discredit someone is to make it this kind of comical, theatrical storyline and just tell you. And then when someone goes, I kind of have a reason to believe that cute little movie, Men in Black, that there are people from an intelligence service trying to protect the world from a non-human intelligence that's here among us. I think that might be kind of real in some way, and people will be like, "Yeah, okay, dude, nice, nice. You watch too many movies. It's
Yeah.
it's perfect."
It is perfect, and it's, good luck Googling Men in Black,
Yeah,
and not getting
exactly,
Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones on your feed,
exactly,
like,
dude.
and we know for a fact, this is fact, that the CIA are involved with media. We know this. This is, you can look at all the documents you like. They've been doing this since the war. And they did this at first to boost morale at home. When the wives were at home and their men were off dying at the war, they had to introduce films like Casablanca and all these other love stories to appease the female population and dissipate or diminish the amount of worry that people had, for their comrades and their friends and family members dying in a horrific war. So they've literally introduced themselves into the media 1000% and are still very, very, very present. Every movie that comes out that has to do with the government, even in a fictional capacity by Disney, has to have adopter approval. So at the very, very least, like I watched this movie with Amar Kandil from Yes Theory. We watched Elio,
Crazy
and
movie, right?
yeah, and at the end, like the arrows featured in there. There's like all sorts of really subtle, uh, lore injections. And then near the end, well, at the end of the movie, after the credits, you see the credits roll through, and you wait a while, and it goes, "We are very grateful for the Department of Defense." And then it goes on to thanking the Space Force, thanking the Air Force for allowing us to portray, this image, yada yada yada. Like even that Pixar movie had to go through a adopter process, an approval process from the government to make sure that they weren't leaking any secrets. And so, at the very least, there is a filtration system that the intelligence agency that you have to go through. That looks at is there any national security secrets? So at the very least is that, and then at the very most, obviously, there is the idea that we can change public perception on very sensitive topics, regardless of UFOs. Put UFOs aside for a second. You have a population that you need to control because any upheaval, any unrest could result in not only economic collapse, societal collapse, uprise, civil war, but could also be shown as a weakness to adversaries and a place for them to strike. So if you're these intelligence agencies, you want to keep the illusion of this strong country alive. And you're going to do that through releases of movies where, you're the hero. Look at all of the, movies and shows that crop up around heroic patriotism right before times of war, where it probably significantly increases the amount of enlisted soldiers once these movies are put out there. That is, 100%. Just like everybody signed up right after 9/11 to like go into the
Yeah.
war, or right after Pearl Harbor. Like there are these things that they will do in order to help, public morale.
Dude, 100%. And I think it actually ties into the conversation we are having earlier about like people perhaps subconsciously that we're all creating our reality and our experience through our thoughts. And I feel like there is this kind of like war going on of information, but also it's like a war over people's minds and like people's beliefs because yes, they are injected into the media and they would absolutely be aware of this fact that like if you can sort of control the way people think, control the way people believe, or like you now control the whole population without them realizing that they're being controlled. It's like this little subversion of their minds. They think they're watching all these like Hollywood movies and whatever, but really there's like this subtle subconscious programming going on, and now everyone's just kind of like a NPC in the simulation.
Yeah, and it's called a program,
Yep.
and
Yep.
it's called a channel.
Yep.
These are the terms that we use when we're being literally programmed and channeled.
Yeah. And then people would turn around and be like, oh, that sounds like a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, it sounds like it's while I crack 25 pills of meds and feed
Yeah.
myself with the worst possible chemicals ever.
Right.
Yeah.
Who is someone that you'd love to sit down with in the skiff that is no longer with us, and why?
Oh, that is. I mean, that is no longer with us. There's a wide range of people.
Mm,
Forrestal, James Forrestal,
mhm.
from the MJ-12. The guy who
Yeah,
allegedly
yeah,
jumped out of a bathroom window.
yeah. Like they all
I
tend
think.
to.
Yeah. I think he would be. He would probably have a lot to say on the matter.
It's
Maybe Bill Cooper or Phil
yeah.
Schneider,
Oh, yeah.
one of those guys. Al Bielek is another one.
I think Bill
Yeah,
Cooper would be a crazy interview. That would be really cool. Was
yeah.
there
How about
was
you?
there someone was there someone alive that you it sounded
Dan
like
Burish.
a Dan Borish. Yeah. Oh, that would
Dan
be
Burish.
amazing too.
That would be it. That would
He's
be it.
hiding somewhere in Canada, isn't he?
Yep. Yeah.
Get
There's
on
a
get onto it, Chris.
his. Yeah, I've tried, but I've also been told, do not attempt.
Really?
Yeah. From multiple people. Um, he is apparently under like guardianship. Like,
Like guards to protect him from the government, or the government is guarding him?
yeah, more like the latter, but it's not necessarily the government. Yeah.
What is
Yeah,
it?
like like ex majestic type protection
Wow.
that, yeah, like he's just gonna be in hiding until he dies type deal.
Where did you
Um
hear this?
several people. Yeah, two people who, you know, have hit me up privately and are like, careful with approaching this
Wow.
guy. Like, do not approach.
And does that
Um
just kind of raise your conviction on the whole Dan Burrows story?
it does and it doesn't. I think it definitely, I value my life. I don't want to put myself in danger. It definitely makes me curious. And if there's a YouTube channel, I think it's his wife, Marcia, has,
Yes.
and you can go onto that and there's some videos of Dan on there with her, and like shorts and stuff about getting vaccinated. And it's very strange. It's very bizarre. And it actually seems cryptic. Like there's
Yeah.
one video where they're like, it's like a 10-second video. Dan's there and Marcy's there and she's holding like a orange crush, like a soda. And she
Mm.
goes, "Oh, we had an amazing time at the location of the gathering. Don't forget your soda or orange crush." And then Dan goes like this to the camera and then the video ends, and you're like, "What?"
That's so weird, dude.
And then there's the website that they have, um, Eagles Disobey. Do you know about this?
Yes. Yeah. It's just a very kind of like nonsensical, what
Yeah,
is
it seems
this?
that way. Well, if you use the Wayback Machine,
Okay.
you can look at all the different posts that they've done, and sometimes it's very cryptic, like MAJ. There's like uh, it seems like a way they're using to communicate, and so
Wow.
it seems nonsensical, and it
And
seems schizo.
it's not necessarily like trying to alert the public, but
No, no,
communicate with
no,
someone.
like an internal communication.
Yes. Yes. Wow. That's
Yeah,
wild.
it's kind of trippy. It's really creepy actually when you look into it like that, and you start going the way back machine. You go like,
Mm.
there's some really
You can see
veiled messages there.
yeah, like an exchange over time going back and forth or
Yes.
something.
Oh yeah, yeah. And without I guess without the cipher, it looks like gibberish. But you can imagine a cipher being applied to this and just kind of like
Mm.
unveiling the messages.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's very very strange. And there's stories of Dan being put in the hospital. I think this is um, Brian Jackson, who's done a tremendous job sort of creating a whole repertoire, a whole website, as well as a talk, which I got to see about Dan Burrish and his life and where he's from and his credentials. And he does a really good job piecing it all together. And yeah, I'm not sure where I was going with this, but Dan is, when you look at all the information that is around this person, yes, he was put into, this is where I was going. He was put into a hospital based on something that has to do with him getting out information, um, like beaten to within like an inch of his life type deal.
Mm. Dude, that's
Um,
crazy. I'm not fully like I've watched a few of the interviews with Dan Burrish, like the long ones, but I'm
yeah,
not like across. I know there's that whole archive there as well, but which I have not made my way through.
you should
But
get
if
Brian Jackson on. He would be happy, I'm sure, to lecture you and your audience on. He knows so much about it, like way more than I
okay,
do.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, but he would. I mean, Dan would be an interesting guy to get on for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah, 100%. And you asked me, I think I'd definitely go with Phil Schneider. I feel like he's kind of been my sort of like, or actually, you know what? Oh god, it's a tough one. If it wasn't Phil Schneider, it would be Robert Dean. I love Robert Dean.
Mm,
Super interesting guy.
yep.
Do you have any more dates for your live show? Because I know you did those two, but did you have like a big run of shows coming up soon?
Yeah, I do. I think I'm launching it in maybe like a week or two, the next date. So this will probably be up. But yeah, if you check out itsprobablynothing.com,
Hmm.
refresh that site. We're going to have like 22 more dates up in the calendar across North America. Um, Jesse won't be with me on all of those dates. I need to say that as a disclaimer for people. He'll join me on some of them, but I'm going to have a range of co-hosts during the entire tour with special guests, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We're doing. I think the first leg will be. I think there's New York, Washington, Ohio, Boston, Minnesota, Detroit, and Toronto. I think that's the first leg in
Damn,
June, I
and you
believe.
said you got some special guests coming up as well. You're not going to bring out Palm Beach Pete or something, are you?
Maybe Dan Burrish. That'd be
Yeah.
amazing.
Oh,
Could you
damn,
imagine? No,
that
I
would be
don't.
crazy.
I that would be crazy. As of yet, it's a hard no from Dan, I think, but I would love to. I would love to get him on there.
That's awesome, man. Is there anything else you wanted to cover while we're here? You wanted to plug or anything like that?
No, man. I want to say I like your show. I like what you're doing. I like the live streams. I think you're doing it in such a fresh manner. I really, really do. You know, it takes a special type of person to stream. It's not easy. It might seem natural to you and to others watching you, but it's definitely a skill, and you've got it. I think it's fun to watch. I try to catch them when I can. I think you're probably bringing more of a newer generation into this topic than anyone else right now. And I think that that's really important. So I commend you on that, and I congratulate you. I think it's awesome. Keep going, keep doing it, keep having this open mind like you do. It's really great to see, and it's refreshing you're funny, you're endearing, you have this really great quality of taking the information in, but like kind of not committing to anything. And I think your audience really feels that, and that's what's resonating with them, and that's why they follow you. I spoke yesterday to I had a podcast I was doing yesterday, a virtual podcast with James Brost, and his producer right at the end of the podcast comes in and he's like, "Hey, a big fan. Somebody who I think you should talk to is Polarity Josh. He's definitely." I was like, "Dude, I was supposed to do a podcast with him like today. It was like yesterday at night that I did this pod." And I was like, "Dude, I was supposed to do it this morning, but I had construction guys here. I'm doing it tomorrow." So it was crazy synchronicity, but he
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
big fan, and he was telling me how, important the work that you're doing is. And so your name is really getting out there. And I think, yeah, keep at it, dude. You're doing a great job. I'm a fan.
Thanks, bro. That means a lot. And I yeah, just want to thank you again for your time. You've been super generous with it today. So appreciate you coming on, dude.
Yeah, all good. My pleasure.